Well, cheers, gentlemen.
We gotta do the clink.
We gotta do a nice clink to welcome our new associate.
Yes, imagine that, a new face on the podcast.
Welcome to the office.
Thank you.
You're already doing great things. So you're aware that this is the thing that we do all the time, this podcast. You got sucked into doing it, so thanks for joining us.
Yes.
And we're doing a follow-up in a way too. We've already discussed the situation of Russell Brand. And
yeah, but you have to tell everyone his name. I don't think you said it, did you?
It's Nick Whitfield.
Nick Whitfield, that's right.
Yes. Very British sounding.
And we're doing a follow-up on the case of Russell Brand, who's from the UK. He's been accused of sexual assault and sexual misconduct and a bunch of other things, which has now gone to a police investigation. And interestingly, Nick is from the UK.
Yes, I am. Although in Canada now since 2011, so it's been a while since I was there. But I do remember Russell Brand being tremendously popular as I grew up. He was on Big Brother's Big Mouth, I think, was his break into mainstream TV. And he stayed popular in the UK as a stand-up comedian. He did various panel shows too. I think then he moved to the US around 2011 for his film career. Came back to the UK at some point and really became a populist figure on the left and was sort of hailed by left-wing news outlets like The Guardian, for example, who gave him various platforms through the years. And then in more recent years, he's sort of swung the other direction towards conspiracy theories, often
X-Files.
Yeah. In his, I think he had had a YouTube channel and also a channel on Rumble, and so he's moved for the most part away from mainstream media and is very critical of it on his two platforms.
Right, and that's interesting.
One platform now, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like you mentioned that he was considered to be very, very leftist, almost communist. I think I would have seen some of his views as being very socialist, communist leaning, and then now he's being criticized as being far right, and so. He's claiming that this is the reason why these accusations are coming out because he's being persecuted. Okay. So, this is, and you mentioned that he's on Rumble as well. That's one of the things we kind of touched on, that YouTube instantly demonetized him, apparently on the request of an MP and other pressures that they were under and so on. But they instantly demonetized his channel, even though he's not been convicted of anything. So that's kind of an issue.
Shut down or just demonetized?
No, he can post videos, but he can't make money off them.
Right. So he can still post, as far as I know.
Potentially they're going to monitor and delete some of his content.
Of course.
Censorship.
Of course.
Thing, right. And so one of the things I noticed is that since all this went down and since our last podcast too, people have been going on and on about him because he's continuing to produce content, right. But he's got these big wild eyes and he looks like a lunatic or like he's manic or something like that. And it's like, we know what happens to people when they're accused, especially when it's made public and it's not just something that they're dealing with their private life. That's not surprising to me.
No, why would it be?
Yeah.
But he's maintaining his shtick, and nothing's really changed in how he presents himself, right?
I'll be honest, I don't actually tune into Rumble, so I haven't seen his latest videos. I always thought he looked slightly crazy.
Like a lunatic?
Yeah. Right. In terms of his shift to he was outspokenly... I say that with all due respect if you're watching. He was outspokenly on the left, sort of very, very verbal about it, and he was picked up, and his decision to move sort of in a sort of right direction was conscious. I mean, it's not just an accusation. It was something that he embraced and articulated to, as opposed to something that's kind of been thrown at him post-accusation.
So you seem to know a lot about it, but why the move towards the right or the perceived right?
I don't know that reason. I don't follow his channel closely. I think a lot of people have said now that he was possibly apprehensive, like given the way he was in the early 2000s. He was always very sexually explicit, quite obscene. There have been many controversies,
which is common with comedians as well. They got to find some button to press, and his like I can't resist saying it. He was Shagger of the Year in England.
She's going to say that at least 4 more times tonight, folks.
Right, and in his books, they're called the Bookie works. He is absolutely not trying to hide that at all. He's been like people have been saying he was hiding in plain sight or whatever. It's like he's never hidden it, and it was part of his charisma and part of his persona. not to say that he's always been successful. Like he did have problems with heroin, which he's quite open about, and he advocates for people trying to deal with drug addiction. He's done a lot of really good things socially in terms of that type of thing, and trying to get rid of the shame of it so that people can get help. And he's open about his addictions and all this other stuff, and then worked through that. But he did have to disappear for a while because he was unemployable for a bit.
Right.
Well, I think his last appearance in UK television was some comedy roast show in 2018, and he appeared with Catherine Ryan, and it's come to light, she did her sort of stand-up routine because they all had to roast one another, in which she said, well, look, you're basically a sexual predator. And that's when he complained to the directors, and I don't exactly know the details, but then he was off that show. And that's come to light recently. So I think in terms of why his shift towards sort of self-media in a way, or social media, has to do with, some people are saying, possible expectation that there were going to be accusations or allegations at some point. And so by going onto Rumble in particular, and YouTube also, although that's been shut down now, he could continue to be quite prominent and continue with an income and maintain his audience even post accusation.
Be provocative.
So it was sort of a strategic shift.
Well, this is one of the things, and we kind of touched on this with other cases before too, is like I know there's some people talking about him being backed by Peter Thiel on his new ventures that he's engaged in, and having people like Elon Musk standing up for him. So they're saying this is not somebody who's vulnerable and just like, close to poverty, trying to make a living off YouTube or something like that. Right. And then they've said that, in fact, what people don't understand is that despite his public persona, there's claims that he had a lot of power behind the scenes. Like you're talking about him trying to, complaining about certain things and not liking the way he was treated. So that people are going to have their stories like that. And that's one of the weird things when these allegations get made public. All of a sudden, everybody comes out of the woodwork saying, I always thought this person was creepy. Right?
Of course.
So let's talk about
I saw
the
that
effect.
coming. It was...
I mean, with Brand, it's just so well documented. I mean, this is not by no means the first controversy. So you have...
I love this controversy.
It's very British.
Yeah. I think in 2008 it was...
People from Scarborough don't speak like this.
I don't know. Well, in 2008 he had the Russell Brand show on Radio 2, and a pre-recorded episode was aired for who knows what reason by the BBC, but it was, in which him and fellow presenter Jonathan Ross left voicemails on the answer phone of proposed interviewee, in which they were pretty lewd and discussing how he'd had sexual relations with the granddaughter. It really actually disrupted. It had a very negative impact on her life for many years. Right. Brand did subsequently apologize after he went into some kind of addiction counseling, I think, for...
Well, sounds like a British shock jock. He's a Howard Stern, right? Like,
yes.
All those stunts.
Then there were others sort of over the years. 2012, the Scottish comedian Billy Connolly sort of reportedly had to reprimand him on set because he refused to let one of the wardrobe assistants leave a room, or he wouldn't begin to work or something like that until she exposed her breasts.
Well, the one on the radio, that's documented. That's not something that, because I worked in film for a while too, and we would hear all these horror stories about actors before they showed up, and then you meet them and they're totally lovely people, right? So that's one of the things about these things. This is the kind of thing that absolutely comes out in the media.
Well, they're the myths.
There's no reason not to believe it, but at the same time, this is the difference between court and the court of public opinion, is people can come out and say anything. Oh, I remember I once met him, 20 years ago, and I'm pretty sure he grabbed my ass. And all of a sudden that becomes a part of the record, and this is a complainant, even though they might have even said, I'm pretty sure.
Right. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Love that phrase.
Or I heard, a friend of mine came up to me and told me. Yeah.
I heard at a party.
So what's the problem with this type of evidence?
It's not evidence. How about we start with that?
Okay. Why is it not evidence?
Nick?
Why is that the evidence of...
No, why is that not evidence, all this chatter?
Yeah, you absolutely... these are all stories coming out in the media, the stuff that you're talking about. That's not evidence. But in court, why would that not be evidence?
Well, it would be hearsay, so it wouldn't be... Okay.
Admissible to begin with.
Because they're out-of-court statements.
Right, out-of-court statements.
quite often things heard from other people.
Exactly. It's bad character evidence. It's where do we can the list goes on.
Well, that's the thing too, is like when you go to trial, there may be 20 people saying bad things about you, but there's only 4 people that you're actually charged with, right? And I'm using big numbers because we're talking about a situation when they have multiple complainants, right? Where there's like 4 or 5. Some of them not quite criminal allegations, but you know, bad character evidence. So, and we've seen this in other high-profile cases too, where they have, like, say, 3 complainants that were approved to go forward for charges. But then the prosecutor in the States or other places, the Crown in any British-related countries, can apply to bring in other witnesses with bad character evidence, even though they're not charged. So how does that happen?
You tell me. It's
I know.
ridiculous.
We don't think it should happen. But they can do similar facts application, and they can try to bring in this evidence, but the weight is against them, because it's prejudicial.
And that's the difference. Courtrooms are contained environments with rules and procedures versus the court of public opinion. There are no rules. It's who talks the loudest.
Well, this is one of the things that for people who don't get their day in court and are just facing the court of public opinion, there's limitations on what an accused, strong limitations now on what an accused can bring into evidence. Whereas in the court of public opinion, they can throw out whatever messages they want. They can say anything they want to about the complainants.
That's kind of tapered by how much money you have to do that with. For example, I have a student who's contacted me, university student, some allegation made by a girlfriend, banned from the campus, just an outright ban from U of T. No explanation other than, well, she says you might have done this. So he has no money to fight that ban. It's a trespass ban. He's had to drop out of his courses. He doesn't have the money, the power to fight that back. He's distraught versus a Russell Brand, he's going to have money behind him, obviously.
Well, and quite often, especially with historical allegations, you don't have the evidence. It's just simply, I could say she's wrong. In this case, it's my understanding that there a number of these complainants, and the research from the journalist does seem to be a better quality than a lot of other cases I've seen. But it's my understanding that there are text messages and there is some documentation of the allegations. So that's definitely an uphill battle.
So what's the theory for them going to the journalists versus the cops first? What have you heard about that?
So you read there, I think a lot of the victims were slightly intimidated by...
Complainants.
Complainants. Intimidated by...
You'll learn.
By Russell Brand's power, his perceived power. One of the complainants did, in fact, contact either Brand's agent or his some representative, complaining of alleged incidents and of sexual violence. I think that was the 16-year-old complaint. Well, she was 16 at the time of having an alleged relationship with Brand. And now she's, I think, in her early 30s, and she complained to his representative and then received a very prompt response from Brand's legal team saying, our client won't be extorted, you're trying to get money out of our client, and so on. So her point of view, I think, was she was concerned she wouldn't be believed or the allegations wouldn't actually go anywhere. It can be quite difficult for police, I think, in the UK to bring anything to trial or to prosecute. I think, the case of Jimmy Savile, sort of renowned, somebody shown to be a paedophile posthumously, but was adored during his life, wildly popular, including with the royal family. And so people, I think, often will look at situations like that in the UK and think, well, they're not, no one's going to believe me. It's not going to work out.
I don't get, since when did going to the police become not a place of safety for complainants? What's triggered them not? I'm not going to be believed versus going to the media. I will be believed. I don't get it.
It was the same question, not just for England, but for
anywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah, for anywhere. Mm-hmm. Like what? Going to the police is no longer a safe thing for complainants? I don't understand that.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of advocates that put that message out into the media because there's a lot of advocacy journalism going on, right? Where they, and I remember seeing a former judge in Canada write an article for, I can't remember if it was Globe and Mail, I'm pretty sure that's where it was, but she actually recommended as a former judge that people don't go to police.
Because what, they won't be believed, or they won't?
So I'm not sure that it was as big of an issue before as it is now, where advocates for what they see as victims are literally telling them not to go to police.
I think, you know...
Well, you won't get a book deal if you go to the police as quickly. Right. Yeah.
And in the UK, there are quite a lot of trust issues, I think, with at least the London Met, the police, with respect to domestic violence or assault against women. Quite a lot of high-profile cases, including Sarah Everard, who was abducted and killed by a police officer. I think it was during the COVID pandemic, and this led to large-scale media interests and protests. And I think trust there is sort of probably at an all-time low at this point, but I don't know how that compares really with Canada. I think the situation is hopefully different.
Well, there was a big sequence of events too with falsely accused people who it became a big thing, and they've done numerous reviews because the police were not turning over material in their possession, which showed messages that completely proved their innocence. And then that came to light. I can't remember his name, Liam something. But then there was like bam, then there were like 4 cases in a row, and they did a complete review, and quite a few individuals, some who'd been incarcerated for a reasonable amount of time, ended up being released because of failures in disclosure. So there's problems in one direction, but there's also, I think that the UK has been a little bit more advanced in terms of looking into protecting the rights of the accused, a little more so than Canada, where in fact they prosecute people
prosecute
making false
complainants with false. Yeah, we had that on a previous episode where that at least they'll go prosecute there. They'll investigate. Here, nothing happens basically. It's rare.
Yeah, but I did come across, and I mentioned to both of you earlier, I came across a case very, very recent that I think is very interesting in terms of these media allegations, and that's in Canada. There's a high-profile case of a minister who's being charged and going to trial, and he brought what's called a third-party records application, and he wants to have access to, because at least one of the complainants, I think more, went to the media, gave interviews, they published big exposés, so he wants to have the media outlet, which in this case was Toronto Star, produce their material to him, and they said, no, we've got journalistic privilege. And so they have the right to protect their interview subjects and so on, and they're being forced to produce those records in court now, and they can make an argument that they shouldn't be allowed, but the judge is going to be allowed to see them and make a determination.
Right. So they're not being released in court; they're being released to the judge for a determination.
Doesn't automatically get them
just so we're clear.
At this point, but the judge will look at them and then determine if there's probative value in it. Right. And so I'm kind of watching this one, and usually the media wins this type of argument, but they tried to have the decision quashed and then they failed. Yeah, right. So this is going forward, and this, I would like to see it be successful, because I think that anybody has a right to know what they're accused of, and they have the right to hear directly what the complainant has said.
Right. Well, and you really got to question motives going to newspaper outlets versus the police. Yeah. Okay, if you're going to go to a newspaper outlet and make a bunch of allegations and want to hide behind that's not right, especially if someone's going to get charged. Well,
and a complainant can always say about media reports, oh, that's not really what I said to them. Right. That's what the journalist said I said. That's right. Right. So if you don't have that material, so and I guess this is one of the main things to try and explain to people about the difference between media trials and actual trials. Why do you have a right to disclosure? And how in the world is it fair to an accused individual to ask them for comment, right? We're going to accuse you of all these things, right? And it's a journalist giving a summary of the allegations, not the actual recording or material. Just a journalist saying you're accused of an individual, I won't even tell you the name, saying you did blah, 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 and another one who says this. What's your response? And they're not allowed to see the actual material, and sometimes they're asked to respond without even knowing who the complainant is.
Right, which is nuts. Okay.
So why is disclosure important?
Over to you, Nick.
Disclosure is important in a legal context, so the accused can have full view of not simply the allegations against him or them, but also the evidence that will be used against them in court. So that's crucial for building a full defense in response to those allegations.
I'm assuming it's the same in the UK, unless you know differently.
I do not know differently because but I assume it is too. Yeah.
And one of the things that, the reasons that we say people shouldn't give a statement until they've actually gotten disclosure and understand the charges. And this is something that I've seen because
if at all.
I have worked with cases that were, people who were being accused in the media. And really one of the tactics that are used by journalists is to try and get you talking. And then you might say something guessing who it is who accused you. And then you give them another lead so they can go find somebody else because you're thinking, who might be pissed off at me?
Right. Very dangerous if you have a long list of potential.
Here's the thing with Russell Brand too, is like people online are saying that they know people, and again, this is hearsay, but they know people who were approached by the media saying, we know that you had a relationship. Can you talk to us about that? And they said, I only had a good experience. And they go, okay, we won't be using
pass.
pass on
that story.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the question is like, when the journalists report that they have 4 or 5 complainants, how many people did they speak to?
Well, it's selective reporting. We know that. Right.
They don't want to report, and we spoke to a number of people who said he was completely respectful. Right. That'll never make it into the report. So this is not like a reasonable overview.
Absolutely not.
And the fact that a number of people are willing to come forward, like we said, there's hindsight. When people read something in the news, they'd be like, oh, I remember meeting him once. Right. And I've talked to somebody who said she wanted to make a Me Too allegation against a member of a band. And then when she got thinking about it, she goes, you know what? I was actually pursuing him when I went there. Right. But in her mind, she's thinking, this is a Me Too story because of the power imbalance. Right. And people's memories get affected by what they've now read, and they think they can reinterpret their interactions.
Huge. We're going to have a memory expert on an upcoming podcast to discuss that. Very exciting. We won't tell you who yet.
We won't say who's.
No. Not even a spoiler or teaser.
We might have 2 coming up, actually.
Yeah. Well, famous American expert on memory.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
And it's such an important factor now because recovered memories.
I was going to say, all that's coming back now, but it's got a new label now. What are we repackaging it as?
Neurobiology of trauma.
Oh my God.
That's
I can't
what it's
even
called
say
now.
that, let alone.
Yeah, it's the neurobiology of trauma.
Neurobiology of trauma.
It's science.
It is.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff, Nick. Well, you have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because Russell Brand's not going to go gentle into that good night, as the poets would say.
No, I mean, I think one difference between, for example, the Russell Brand situation and the John Ghomeshi trial, obviously he was acquitted there. But you talk about like the legal form and then the court of public opinion. In that case, the court of public opinion was really more damning for Ghomeshi than the court could ever have been, or imprisonment, because his career was over. He was, that's really it. He hasn't really been anywhere in sight since then. That could be why people also go to the media rather than police, not just...
It's revenge.
But I think with Brand, I don't know if his popularity is such that it won't actually have such an impact. I mean, that's difficult to say. YouTube have shut him down.
Momentarily, at least. Yeah.
And then, but he gave a show. I think the evening after the first allegations broke in the Times and on the Dispatches documentary in the UK. It was extremely well attended. He got a standing ovation. People held banners up saying they support him. So he does have very, very firm popularity.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting case to watch. And so it's kind of, I think it's good to kind of check in on that from time to time. But for me, it's like the way the media is, the role they're playing, I think should be watched very carefully, because when I tried to look up the recent news on it, I saw the most insane hit pieces being written.
Of course.
Absolute biased advocacy pieces against him. And that kind of a thing, I don't even know why they do it, because it just reinforces the conspiracy dialogue that he's saying this is all happening for political reasons.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
But you made it through.
You made it through. You survived. You didn't even break a sweat.
No, I hope not.
No, you did it. Now you get to do the pillow ritual, though.
Oh, right.
Don't forget the pillow.
Don't forget to
He has to hold it.
It's like screeching in Newfoundland.
Yeah, it's kind of like screeching in, except you don't drink
You
anything.
can read the back of it. It says the same thing.
Oh, I see. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you.
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you.